Hello, everyone. It's Larry Johnson with another edition of Eight Principles Voices. And I'm delighted to have with me today Kristian Jaloway, who is a Catholic priest, also now a lay minister, and he has a new book on leadership within the church. And when I found out all about that, I think he's also a consultant to parishes. He has a buddy by the name of John Oberg. Here's the book, everyone. Right here, you can get your own copy, and we're going to be talking about some topics about leaders in the church, about how to make a good leader, how to create a healthy parish in that respect, and how some of the key issues that he's dealt with in his own career. So, welcome, Kristian.
Thanks, Larry. It's great to be here. Good to see you again.
So, uh, this is interesting. Here we have an evangelical Protestant interviewing a Catholic, and we're going to have fun, aren't we?
That's right. It sounds like a joke, right? Two two guys walked into a bar, evangelical Protestant and a Catholic.
Yes,
That's
yes.
right.
um, well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I think you live in Austin, Texas. That tells you a little bit about you. Are you a native
That's
Texan?
right. I am a native Texan, about seven generations. My
Whoa.
family came back from Poland on the first and now biggest Polish settlement in the country, in the United States, outside of Chicago, I think. And then the German side settled the other side of San Antonio, Bernie, and the Hill Country, which is beautiful. And so, funny thing, I wasn't raised in Texas. When I was seven, my dad moved us to Anchorage, Alaska. He was a computer programmer and worked for oil companies up there for 10 years. When I was seven, we moved back here to Austin, again with his job, and finished high school here, joined the seminary with the Legionaries of Christ, which was a big international order. And they had a great sales pitch. It was basically, you're going to learn languages and meet the Pope and study in Rome and be a missionary and change the church. And I said, great, let's go. And yeah, so I stayed quite a while. I was ordained and served 4 years as a priest, and then later, big crisis in the organization. I helped navigate that for a while, and then came out and realized I need to look at my life, and that crisis didn't. It shook my faith in some ways, but mostly it just helped me to say I need to relook at my decision making process up till this point, and I realized I wasn't there for the right reasons, and I needed to leave, and that was the hardest decision of my life. But went through a big transformation of how to become a layperson after that, with theology and philosophy degrees and classical liberal arts and things, and had to get into the business world, and did a master's at Texas A&M in public policy, thinking I'd go government route. And then leaving that, I said, leadership was always my focus. It was always the interesting thing. And as a missionary, you always know you're going to leave. Like you're
Yeah.
sent there for a time, and the key is to find local people who you can train to some degree and turn the keys over to you when you're gone. And so well, how do we do that here at home, here in the U.S.? And started working mostly though with government entities. I was consulting, doing yeah, Covey's work and other things, and Pat Lencioni, Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and this and that for fire departments and city governments. And one of my mentors in running that business was John Oberg, who turned out he knew my family from some church activities way back in the day. And so when I reached out to him, he was happy to help out. And eventually we started to partner together. And so now it's been seven years. And he was the
Wow.
one who really, yeah, who really brought me along. So
Let me rewind a little bit. You said something that really caught my attention, and that is when you were a practicing priest, you had an experience that, although it didn't shatter your faith, it shook it, and then you had to reevaluate the reasons you were doing what you were doing. So, a lot of people have been down that road, Kristian, when
mm,
they've pursued certain vocational professional interests, and also trained professionally for it, as you
yeah,
had.
yeah,
And then you're a thoughtful spiritual man, so you're always looking at the real reasons why. You're not just working to live. All right. So
right.
can you tell me a little bit about that process. What happened? You don't tell me more detail
Sure,
than you want
sure,
to, but
sure, sure.
how that all came about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is well, the whole, abuse crisis in the church, I think, is pretty well documented, so I won't get into that too much. But it turned out that the founder of our organization, a Catholic priest from Mexico, was a really bad guy who put on a really good front. And so it hasn't happened too often, but I say in the history of the church, where the founder of a Catholic religious congregation in the church of priests um, had that kind of double life. But a week after my ordination, I found out that they kind of sat me down. They're like, that's when the news was about to go public. And so they told me, and so it was a very short honeymoon, so to speak.
So
After
you're the new you're the new kid on the block, and then
I'm
they take
brand
you
new,
and let me
fresh,
tell
as
you
they
what's going
say.
on here.
Yeah. And they're like, guess what happened? And so the thing was, so I realized really quickly the to live life intentionally and deliberately, a lesson that I learned along the way was don't make major changes when you don't see clearly. So
Let's unpack that for a minute.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
make major changes when you don't see clearly. That sounds like the antithesis of being young.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. Right. So another way to say that in classical spiritual language is what they would call desolation, is when you're not feeling good. Things are
Mm.
unclear. It's foggy. I don't know what to do. Consolation is when you're feeling good. You see clearly. Like, not that life's a breeze, but I know what's going on, and I know who
Hmm.
I am and where I'm at. And so when you want to make a big decision, wait for a time of consolation. Wait till you're in a good place. And a lot of times you need to move yourself to that place. If you throw yourself down on the couch and grope around and moan, like, you're probably not going to change very quickly to get that
No.
clarity. And so it took a lot of work. I was going to a therapist. I had a spiritual guide who was a monk who was very wise and thoughtful, and helped me through that stage and helped me to start unpacking. Hey, kind of like, I was 30, 35 at the time. So kind of hitting that midlife crisis,
Yeah, yeah, you
you
were getting up
know,
there. Yeah,
yeah, and
you
figuring
weren't
out
22 anymore. That's for
I
sure.
wasn't 22. And I had a lot of responsibility. I was running an international boarding school. And so we had kids and families and all of their interests and needs. And this whole crisis hit them, at the same time it hit me and the rest of the organization. And so I said, okay, first let's work through this for them. They're my main responsibility. Later, when I had that took about 2 years to get through all of that and redo the rule books, and a lot of things that were realized were based on really a sick man's psychology, and we need to revamp that based on what's the truth of human behavior, of education. What should a school be? Let's just look at the it's been around there for a long time. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to take what's classic and true and apply that with modern psychology and those things. And so that took about 2 years. And then the third year, I was able to really start taking time for myself. By the fourth year, I was going deep into all those things I said about my own discernment, and re-going through everything I had been taught and learned about what my decision should be based on. And I just realized, like, some things were good and some things weren't good in that decision process. And so I think one reason I left home, I was happy to leave home when I was 18, was um, although we have a beautiful family, it wasn't always the happiest home environment. And I think I was 18 and ready to go and needed to go, right? And two is like, okay, I'm happy to get out of here and go explore the world pretty far away. Um, and I've learned a lot of the reasons behind that. And our family's helped, like, healed a lot from a lot of those different things now, which is beautiful. Um, and another thing was just like a misplaced sense of, okay, I'm going to save the world. And in
Hmm.
particular, that religious group was very strong on that theme. So much so that at one point, it was actually my therapist who said, that sounds like a heresy in Christianity. It's not you who save people,
No.
it's Jesus Christ who saves people. and so why are you so hung up on this thing that if I leave the priesthood, people are gonna suffer for it? Like, it's like, no, you're not the savior.
There's a I know you're familiar with the television series The Chosen. All right.
Oh yes, yeah.
There is a scene, and I forget exactly where it is, but Jesus has been talking to his disciples about them going out and doing things. Forget exactly what it was, but he leaves the room, and I think it was Andrew says to the other, "No, no, you're not doing it. He's allowing you to be part of it. He's
Mhm.
allowing you to be a partner with him. In other words, it's not you instigating this. You know, he's allowing you. He doesn't need you. That's what he says. He doesn't need you, but he's allowing you to be a part of it. I thought that was a wonderful way of putting it. He doesn't need us in that sense. And that's what
Right,
you were saying.
right.
Oh, yes, it's me, 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 me. Oh, no, no. He doesn't need you, but he's going to allow you to be a part of it. Another way I heard it expressed once is that we're in a junior partnership with Jesus. He's the senior partner. We're a
Yeah,
junior partner.
yeah.
So,
So true. Yeah, that was a hard lesson, and until I got to the point though where I was able to accept that, I wasn't able to see clearly. Back to that initial phrase, and so when I peeled away all the different layers of, okay, this is midlife crisis, this is the crisis of the founder and his double life. Here's the stuff from your family of origin you need to still deal with, and get to just like me and God alone without society, without, it's just me and you, right? That took
mhm.
a long place to get there. But at that point, it was really clear that he didn't want me to stay there as a priest. And so I started what's called the laization process, which is kind of an internal church legal process to be dispensed from the vows or the obligations, essentially, and say, yep, you're free to go. Um, I'm now married in the Catholic Church with three little boys, beautiful wife, and very, very happy. Um, but it was a long process, and I mean, not necessarily long, calendar wise, but long in the sense of it's a deep journey into the dark depths of who am I and what am I going to do, and part of it is very practical. How am I going to get a job? Got philosophy and theology degrees, and who's going to hire me, and where am I going to do? And so I started bottom of the rung. I was working bags at Delta Airlines, loading planes,
Oh,
and
really?
that was
Really?
my first job. I was willing to do anything. It's like I just need a job to pay for a room and board and get on my feet. And so um, I'd always liked aviation. I grew up in Alaska, like I said. Everybody and their uncle are pilots up there. Even the pastors are all pilots. It's kind of the only way to get around. And so I always enjoyed flying and aviation. And so it was a good fit for a little while and started going up the ranks. And I had a lot of education, so it wasn't hard to excel. It was a hard physical job, but
Mhm.
pretty
Oh,
soon they
lugging those bags around.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was 37. I wasn't 22, like you said. So it was a workout. But I said, hey, they're paying me to work out. And on the days off, I was able to go use the flight benefits, and you can fly for free around the world, basically. So I'd go hang out with seminarian friends in Madrid, or fly to Italy, or fly to. I took my brother to we're classic history buffs, so we went to Constantinople, which is, of course, in
Ah,
Istanbul.
yes.
Yeah.
Constantinople, the
Yes.
great capital of the East.
That's
Oh,
right.
all
That's
right.
right. So
Um,
yeah, yeah. So it was a fun time. It was a hard time, and eventually realized, yeah, that wasn't my full-time job. That was going to be, I could have, I was doing well, and I became trainer. You become, what was it, a team lead, and then the trainer, and then assistant manager, and I was kind of destined to become a general manager, and just didn't seem like that was the right fit for me. And
so,
so
so when did the muscle requirements begin to decline? I mean, when you were a team leader or assistant manager, when was it no longer?
more trainer and assistant manager. Yeah, that was definitely less physical, more intellectual. So
Okay. All
yeah,
right. Okay.
yeah.
Well, so far, knock on wood, I mean, Delta's my airline of choice, and they've always delivered with the bags so far.
They're
Uh,
good. They're good.
uh,
They do well, and I gotta say I love them. They're a great airline. I got to go visit their headquarters in Atlanta many, many times for different training sessions. And yeah, let's see what happens with Southwest. It looks like they're becoming the next big airline. They want to
Well,
get
let's
rid of
see.
their free bags and things. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
because that was their whole reason for being, so I wonder how that's going to translate if they're going to be another
Yeah.
United Delta lookalike. um but I remember, well, it was when I was there I was well, the the hub I go through is Delta, is Salt
In
Lake.
Atlanta, Salt Lake. Okay,
Salt
right,
Lake.
right. Yep.
and I had a long-term client that I would have to go from one end of that airport to the other to make a pretty tight connection. And I remember asking one of the ladies on the thing, I said, well, will my bag make it? He said, your bag will make it before you do. And I thought, that is incredible. I've always remembered the bag will make it before I do.
Yeah.
And yet I'm
Yeah.
running from one end of the airport to the other. That's
Yeah.
that's quite a system, Kristian. If
They're
they
good. They're good. And they
um,
track those bags. Now they have the RFID chips in the bag tag, so
mm-hmm,
they know exactly. You can see, of course, on your app, right, where exactly where your bag is.
mm-hmm.
And they invest a lot in their people. They invest a lot in their technology. And I mean, I still love flying Delta every time I can. And
That's what I do. So you're telling me they have the technology. So when they pulled my bag off that airplane, they knew exactly where it was going. They knew when the next plane was leaving, everything, and to make it get there in time to do what it needed to do.
yep,
Um,
yep. And what they do, they segregate the bags. So if you have a tight connection time, they're going to put those bags either in a special baggage compartment or or the close to the front of the door. So those are the first ones coming off, so they can get them to where they need to go. So they're
okay.
yeah, it's very well organized, and there's a lot of training that goes into it. I was shocked how much training, like you don't have to have a college degree, but you've got to be pretty on your toes. And it's very physical and intellectual. Like you a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving equipment, a lot of very expensive equipment, right? I mean, a plane costs what, $20 million? You
Mm-hmm.
know, you bump it and all of a sudden that plane's not flying for at least a couple hours till it gets checked out. So you've got to know what you're doing for sure.
Oh, that happened to me when I was in a small airport in Oregon, Klamath Falls, Oregon. Okay.
Okay.
And it wasn't Delta. I had to go another airline. But they're they're loading bags, and this cart came around here just a little too quick, and the
Mm,
cart clipped the edge of the wing.
mm,
And I don't think it did any damage, but I guess you never
sure.
really know. So
Sure.
everything was off. They had to inspect it,
Yeah.
do all this, do all that. By
Yeah.
that time, all the connections were bad.
Right.
So
Right.
and so I flew into San Francisco, and I was going far east. And by that time, all the eastbound flights had left.
The left. Sure. Sure.
And
So
so I
you're
spent the night in
overnight.
the airport and started all over again the next day, all because of that one. He cut the corner a little too fast, and I was
Yeah.
sitting in the departure lounge. I saw him when he did it. I'm going, oh no, no.
Yeah, yeah. Now they have to call the engineers, they have to inspect it, they have to write
Mm-hmm.
it off. If it is okay to go, it's still a long inspection process, and then write it up and make sure everything's, which, again, is safety first. I mean, it makes
Oh yeah,
sense.
oh yeah.
The funny thing is with the whole system and the bags, like I was shocked, and eventually people would ask, like, how could they lose my bag? I'm like, you don't realize there are thousands of flights a day, millions of bags and customers per day. There is one way to get your bags where they're supposed to go, and there are like 25,000 ways for them not to get there. So
Get
it's a miracle your bags get there most of the time. Like,
oh yeah. Oh yes. Uh,
don't, by the way, just from a former baggage handler, like, don't don't carry bags. Just do a carry on if you can. That's definitely
oh really?
a good
Okay.
rule of thumb. If you can go just with a carry on, just take a carry on. So much
Okay.
easier. You don't have to wait for your bags. Yeah, sometimes you
Okay.
can't. You're going skiing. You've got all this gear,
Now
or you're
see,
going somewhere.
we're
You
coming
know.
from two different worlds, Kristian, because I've flown for a long, long time. I don't want to carry anything on but my briefcase. Let somebody else
Okay. Okay. Well,
do all the schlepping. You know, I
sure,
mean,
sure,
and
sure.
and one thing I also do like is people get on like their pack horses and they're going down the aisle like wham wham wham. You know.
That's true too. I mean, if I go, if I go on a business trip, I'll definitely just take a carry on, and
Mm-hmm.
even sometimes not even my briefcase is in my carry on. But yeah, if you're traveling family stuff, you're going for vacation, you're going. I as a baggage handler, I used to have my backpack. I took my backpack to Istanbul. I took my backpack to Madrid. I just a backpack. That's it. A couple changes of
Okay.
clothes and one pair of shoes and but it's different now, right?
Okay.
As you get it, that's
Yeah.
when I was non-revving. That's non-rev is when you're a non-revenue passenger, and so
Mhm.
you're flying standby. You're figuring out where to go. I'd fly in. I couldn't get where I was trying to go, so I'd fly to New York to get the next connection back to Texas, and sometimes I have to fly into JFK and then take a cab or a bus over to
LaGuardia.
LaGuardia and catch the flight down to DC because they have an hourly flight. There's all these things you learn about the system, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole world in and of itself, which was
Okay.
a lot of fun to navigate. And it was like,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not that young anymore. I need to be making a different pay grade to do it. I still do a little bit of consulting with the airlines, which is fun. But
All right. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah,
then you decided to give parishes, churches, congregations an opportunity to get serious about their leadership and their management. All right. And
yeah.
that's because you worked with John, you met him?
That's right. That's right. John was doing this kind of work since 2007 and then had a conversion experience. Interesting YouTube videos up there, John Oberg's conversion. He was driving and went off a overpass in his Forerunner.
He went off
He
an
went off
overpass.
an overpass in his Forerunner and in the air said, God, if you let me raise my children, I will come find you. He was kind of raised nothing, atheist, agnostic, and so that was a massive conversion experience. He walked away from the accident without a scratch, and EMS couldn't believe it, you know. And
So when he went off, what did he hit? Solid ground, the water?
he hit the road underneath him. I mean, it
Oh,
was it was um it was an overpass, and so it was icy, which is rare, but on the bridges in Texas ice over
oh
first, and
yes.
so
Oh well,
you
they
know
are, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So maybe it's everywhere. Anyways, in
Well,
Alaska,
that's
everything ices over at the same time. It's all
well,
just
that's because
ice.
it's so cold. But I mean, when you're in that right hovering at the thing, you
Yeah.
know, if it's solid ground, it's the ground's warm enough to keep it wet. But the
Yeah.
air going underneath the bridge will I well, haven't you seen the signs
Right.
bridge
Right.
ices before
Right.
roadway?
Exactly. Exactly. And so he hit this icy patch. He saw a car had already spun. It was right in front of him, and he said, either I'm going to broadside this guy and kill him, or I go off the road. So he drove off the road thinking it was a grassy embankment, but it was only a little stretch, and then it was just a 2-story drop off. So he goes right over it, you know, in the air, has this conversion moment, walks away fine, and then he goes to look for God, and he found him eventually. He tried a few different places, ended up coming here to St. Mary's Cathedral, which is the Catholic Church downtown here, and had after. Anyways, I won't get into the weeds, but eventually became Christian, became a practicing Catholic man, and that's when he met my parents, was through a church event. They had been going there for a long time and teaching different classes to couples. And so when he got married, they went through their class, and eventually it was through other connections in town who were saying, "Hey, you're in this leadership thing. You're a Catholic guy. You got to meet this John Oberg." And so, like I said, he knew my name already, kind of knew the family history a little bit, and accepted a coffee invitation and sat down and just started telling me everything I was asking questions about. How do you start a business? How do you do consulting? How do you get your first client? How do you, all this stuff? And I was naively, I was like, I hope I'm not stealing clients from you. And he just laughed gently. He was like, no, no, we're not in competition. Believe me. He was charging whatever, you know, $10,000 a day. And here I am trying to get my first client. And in fact,
Hmm.
I undershot them so much. It was the local fire department. And I forgot what they said, great, what does this cost for whatever, a couple days of training for their officers and whatnot. And I lowballed him so much. He was like, we've priced this. I think it should be a little higher than that. And so I gradually learned how to price my
Yes.
consulting more
Yeah.
reasonably.
Well, and there's an interesting thing about pricing consulting. Um, there's actually a point at which a higher price commands more value. But
Hmm.
then if you go too
Hmm.
high, then you've priced yourself out of the market. There's that. And if you lowball yourself, you actually hurt yourself because it's not valued as
Right.
highly.
Right.
And it's just the psychology of pricing it. Um, and well,
Yeah.
I'm looking at this book, Management as Mission: Unlock the Divine Potential of Your Parish Management. So the subtitle, tell me about that. Unlock the divine potential of your parish management.
Yeah, I think, and John saw this when he was going through that first experience becoming a member of the church, was that there's sometimes it goes really well. If you started the user experience. So who's the person? Who's the person seeking truth or faith or community, and what is going on for them? And there's so much beauty in Christianity. There's so much divine potential, in other
Mm-hmm.
words, of truth and goodness and the beauty of the history of the church and the faith and all these things and the beauty of community. And yet, because of poor management, poor leadership, many times that potential is just sitting there unrealized.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we thought was, hey, how do we express that? Sometimes we can be kind of negative, like, man, things are so bad. There's so many crises and scandals and all these things, which are true. And yet we have the beauty of the faith. We have Jesus's examples and words and the gospels and all the truth contained in the Bible. And why is that not being, why do people not receive that? And so often it didn't seem like it was because they didn't want to give it to them. That was their whole purpose of going to become a pastor or go to seminary or work for the church. But there were just organizational things holding them back. It,
Mm-hmm.
wa- it was just the daily not knowing how to manage the systems, the processes, the things. So I think, tell me what you think, but I think most people when they have a conversion experience and become part of a church, they do it because of the theology. They do it because of the attraction of the Bible and the truth there and Jesus himself, right?
It's the
But when they
experience. It's that internalized experience, is what it is. Yes.
Yes, yes. And
And there.
and then when they would leave, though, this is my theory more and more, as I think they leave more because of the human issues.
Oh
They leave
yes.
because
Oh
somebody
yes.
yelled at them, somebody didn't treat them well, somebody just forgot about them, whatever it was, right? And so that's like, how do we fix that? And so that's what the book is about. That's what our work is
Okay.
about.
Well, that's fascinating. You take the fervor of a new Christian, and they go into a parish, and if they've never grown up in the church, it's all new to them. And some of it's pretty, no pun intended, pretty Byzantine in the way
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
approached. Um, and then, as you said, someone makes an offhand comment, someone maybe unintentionally excludes someone, or maybe worse. Very, there aren't that many people who leave for a theological reason. They're a handful,
Right,
but
right.
you'll see that more in Protestant churches than you will
Sure,
in
sure.
Catholic churches.
Sure, that's a good point. Yeah,
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 but
yeah. And I think
um,
there's a huge thirst for truth and faith in today's world
mhm.
and society. And we were talking about other podcasters earlier, and you just see this. They're exploring faith, they're exploring things like consciousness. They're talking openly about religious revival. What does that look like, and things like that. So,
Well, I think the reason you're seeing that is the postmodern era has hit rock bottom, There's nothing else left, just nothingness. And you see that especially in the appeal of religion and conservatism among young people, especially young men. You
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
I mean, we saw in the last election this unbelievable exodus of young men from the sort of nihilistic, materialistic. I need something else. What's really important. Why am I alive? What do I need to do? That they're asking those kind of questions. It wasn't just business as usual.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I think there's a revival that's coming, Christian. I really do. I can see it. I mean, you're seeing the creation of what I would call serious, authentic, professional productions for entertainment. I'm thinking of The Chosen, for instance, and more recently, what is it, House of David, which I've seen both. I think the difference there was the House of David's a little more theatrical.
Sure.
And it's still, I mean, I went back, it's still very consistent with the
With
words
the
in
writings, with the
scripture.
text, right?
With the text, it's still very consistent. Someone said at some point, well, why does he carry this bull to be sacrificed to Jesse's house? Well, if you read the text, he's trying to what's the word, confuse Saul. He's trying to not give away that what he's really there to do is anoint a new king. So he has this subterfuge. He's going to go visit Jesse and do something else. It is in the text. And so people don't read that too closely. And then the whole thing about Samuel telling we have to stand here until David shows up. It's in the text. There it is. You got to stand till he shows up. So, but I'm seeing a lot more of that. And of course, I think The Chosen, which I took a long time before I ever decided to dip into those waters. Well, I have a pretty sensitive BS meter, Christian, and I don't like things that are cheesy or propagandistic. I mean, I know what I believe. I'm a serious believer, but it's like this is fake. This isn't the way people behave.
There's right.
And
Jesus of Nazareth was kind of like that, like the super spiritualized. Yeah, it just doesn't look real.
No, well, and the irony of that is one of the great heresies of the church, Gnosticism, early on. That Jesus was totally spiritual, and that's one of the early heresies. I'm going, but how to pull that off?
Yeah.
And
what did you think of the Passion of the Christ? Did you watch that one?
I have not watched.
It's 20 years old now, so
yeah. Well, I thought it was a little bit what's the word? Gratuitously violent.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
And I mean, now the last segment of The Chosen is now in the theaters, and I
haven't seen it, so I'm curious. Yeah.
Well, there are 3 pieces to it. I've seen the first 2, and now the third one, which is the conclusion, is now in the theater, and the second one's still there. I'm going to go see that this week and just see how they handle it. I presume the description doesn't say they go through the crucifixion, but I presume it does because they have to go through that. Right. And it's 192 minutes.
Okay.
And the one before that was 180 minutes. So the one that was 180, it didn't feel that long to me. It had a nice rhythm to it and a nice pacing to it. And of course, that requires good writing, good editing,
for sure,
to maintain that interest and not draw it out or whatever. And of course, the man that was chosen to play Jesus does it extremely well. And who, by the way, he is also Roman Catholic. You probably know that.
I've gotten to meet him on 1 or 2 occasions.
Oh, have you? Oh,
yeah, Jonathan Rumi's.
All right, I'm jealous. All right, I'm jealous. And I hear from everyone that he's very much a self-effacing kind of man. And of course, I mentioned to you earlier before we started that I was having a conversation with Bishop Barron recently, and he's a good friend of Rumi's.
Right.
And has known him for a long time, and he confirmed that to me. Yes, he's really a good guy, and but the thing, I like the writing because Jesus, as presented in that production, is a very purposeful person.
Yes.
but
Yes.
but a person who has feelings,
Hmm.
who can become annoyed,
Hmm.
who is compassionate, can even be hurt. Like, why did he do
Right.
that to me? Kind of thing.
Right.
And but doesn't sin, and that they managed to produce that quite admirably. I thought, you know.
It's so good. I think it really just brings alive the scriptures in a way
Mm-hmm.
that is hard to do just reading the scriptures or even with a good Bible study. It just helps you see it. It tells a story in a new way, and
And
storytelling is so important.
they've added just enough backstory to link
Right.
everything together in a very wonderful way. They've
Yeah.
just, things that would be very consistent with what would be expected. And I think one of the things that I thought was almost genius was placing Matthew on the spectrum. Uh,
Mm,
I, I thought, well, this is really clever the way they did this, you know,
yeah.
and then the way they were able to handle Z, a man that was brought up and raised to be the enemy of Rome.
Right.
Everything was about hostile, violent takeover, and that was his. And he'd been trained to do that. That he was sort of the commando of the era, you know. And then to be
Right.
converted. Now what do I do? Um, and then in that scene where Jesus takes his dagger and just pitches it into the river, um, I'm totally defenseless.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm just trusting God. Yeah.
I, and we all have those things that we grow up with that we think are sort of our talisman, the thing we're not going to get rid of because that's our protection. And
Yeah.
then he just takes it and no, 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 I'm your protector. Just toss that into the river. That can be very frightening. Uh,
It is. It
and
is.
so, so
Yep.
tell
Well,
me, I want a story.
yeah. Yeah.
What
Um,
tell me a
mhm.
story, and of course we want to change the names to keep
Sure. Sure.
the guilty from being revealed. Notice I didn't say innocent.
Yeah, right.
uh,
That's right.
but
That's right.
what, like, I guess first, what would be the one or two or three categories of issues you generally run into, and then pick one of those and tell us a story surrounding it.
Yeah. Yeah. So probably the first thing that people realize they want to talk to us is because they're just feeling overwhelmed. They're a pastor. They like I did. They studied philosophy, theology, what have you, biblical studies, and now they're running this organization called a church, a parish, and they're just overwhelmed with all the administrative stuff. Um, Probably the next one is something around their team, and so they're concerned their team isn't either performing as well as they can be, or aren't organized very well, or their meetings aren't very effective. But it's something the team just doesn't seem to be working well together. Um, the other one is financial usually. So either like the fundraising isn't working, or they're not even sure, they don't really have a good budget process or sometimes any budget process. So they're not really clear how much they're spending. They're bringing money in. It's just kind of a mess and they're not sure where to start, how to get into that, or the people running it don't seem to give them the right answers. Um, and then the list goes on, right? Like volunteers are an issue. They don't have enough. People get burned out. They might have a board of directors, so to speak, but that's a mess, or it's just ineffective, or, so, starting with a real story. I remember at one point, and there's a part in the book about this where we say, hey, how do you manage people who are better than you? And so the
How do you
key,
manage people that are better better than you? Now
right.
that doesn't that depend on the kind of person you're talking to. I was always taught that A level people hire A level people and B level people hire D level people.
That's exactly right. And so I had a pastor who I'd worked with for a long time, and he finally was just admitted that to me. He said, "Look, I'm nervous if I hire people who are smarter than me, even if it's in a different field, that I won't know how to manage them. I'll just, they'll blow past me basically." And when he was able to acknowledge it and admit it, we were able to work on his mindset issue around that and help him get to that A level position where he was able to surround himself with other A level players, even though he's A level in pastoral ministry, they're A level in finance, or organizational health or whatever it is, right? And so working through that with him was a huge breakthrough. And when he just said, "Oh, well, of course, it's not that I was intentionally hiring the wrong people, but subconsciously I was keeping us from growing because I was kind of keeping them one notch below me. And so the organization can't grow. He's the roadblock. He's the bottleneck. All those things. Um, so it's just really cool to see when they get past that point, right? And one of those things, hardest thing probably for pastors is just any kind of conflict. They really they want people to love Jesus. But part of that is like they need to love the church, and then the church shouldn't do anything that is going to make them upset. And that's where I think there's a disconnect.
Yes.
And sometimes that means letting people go, you know,
Yes.
because it's either the wrong person or it's the wrong time for this person, or we just need to grow and this position doesn't really make sense anymore. And so we need to let this person go. And so I've started to tell more and more, it's like, if that person is not thriving in the role they're in, how is it charitable to leave them there?
It's not. It's not. It's really not. And sometimes they would, if it's done in the right way, they welcome a change.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
it's when I work with nonprofit boards, and we could talk about that all afternoon. All right.
Yeah.
But that there, as we know, there's a lot of sloppy recruiting when it comes to nonprofit boards, and people aren't given clear expectations at the front end, and that's a lot of it right there. Um, and I tell people that when you use any kind of volunteer, but especially a board, there are really only two things they want to know. They want to know what success looks like for them
Mhm.
and how much time it's going to take. And if you can answer those two questions satisfactorily, you're probably going to do a pretty good enlistment. But when you have a change in this, what I call social contract, my work, my work's in the area of fund development, and that's an area that a lot of people just want to avoid altogether. Well, we'll just kind of, we'll just kind of avoid that, but sooner or later it comes home to roost, and then I'm called in to say, well, no, we're going to redefine it this way, and there are some people that go, well, that isn't how I was enlisted, you see. And what I tell people is if you do it right, people will self-select off. But the
Right.
key is,
Right.
because that isn't what they signed up for. But
Sure.
I don't believe in public humiliation, and some people do, but I don't. And then, and
You
then
don't need it. It doesn't,
you
yeah, it
don't
doesn't
need it.
really help.
And then,
Yeah.
if you do it right, you can put them in a place where they can really shine and be productive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That,
Exactly.
that's the
100%
key.
agree. And I've seen that exact same thing. We have the chapter 4 in there, building your pastoral team, which kind of covers all of those things because it needs to be clear that not everybody should be on the team. And
Mm-hmm.
just because you built your organization with this team to this point doesn't mean that's the same team that's going to take it to the next level. And so, you know, getting those things into your head is one thing, putting them in practice is another thing. And sometimes that means,
Mm-hmm.
there's that just learning curve of, okay, I got to have a hard conversation. But like you said, a lot of times people are just waiting to leave. And they just didn't know how to say it. They didn't want to upset the pastor. And the pastor comes to them and kind of is like, hey, I think somehow this is not working out. They're like, oh, I'm so glad you're open to this conversation. And I've even had pastors who I just said, go ask them what do they want? What they don't seem like they're thriving. So just have a conversation. How are you doing? How are things going? What do you want? How long do you see yourself being here? Those kinds of things. And all of a sudden that person's like, you know what? I wasn't going to say this until, I gave my 2 weeks notice, but actually I'm dating a guy in some other city. I really want to move there and pursue that relationship. And probably I have a month left. And the pastor called me back and was like, that was a disaster. They're leaving. I'm like, what do you mean? You actually know they're leaving a month or 2 months before they're going. They're not going to give you 2 weeks notice. They're going to leave on happy terms because you brought it up and you can plan this well instead of all of a sudden they're out the door. Like what better position would you like to be in?
Oh, and everyone's happy.
Right, right, right.
Everyone's happy. Um, yes. Um, you were talking about leadership a few minutes ago, and I think one of the top qualities of a good leader is knowing what you don't know.
Hmm.
If you know what you don't know, you'll be much more open to acquiring staff that will give you that knowledge or support you in that area that's a mystery to you. Um, it's I think
Right.
you can correct me, but I think our of course well maybe you were, but our pastors some of the most highly audited people in for the tax people because they don't know what they're doing. Um,
That's a good question. I'm not. Probably in some churches. I
well, I
think
mean
by
as
and large.
individuals, but see,
Oh, as individuals,
individuals.
that could be. Yeah, that could be. They don't make a lot of money, so I don't know how much they get audited in reality versus. But that's a good question. They certainly don't really know what they're doing, and a lot of them kind of just throw up their hands to the winds and say, "Okay, I trust the Holy Spirit. You know, He'll kind of take care of everything." And so there's a lot of embezzlement in church work and in maybe in nonprofit work. I heard
Oh yeah,
something when it comes to cash, like $5, $5 of every 100 is just lost in cash transactions in church stuff, ministry. Um,
wow.
and you know, there's been lots of other scandals when it comes to people working in the church and
No, we
embezzling,
could name a few.
even
Yeah.
pastors. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, heck, even the Vatican, there's been all these financial scandals, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
goes all the way up and down leadership. And
Yeah,
yeah, so having,
because it's comprised of sinners. We're all sinners, Christian.
Larry,
Converted
you
sinners.
found the dirty secret. That's right.
Converted sinners.
That that is ultimately the reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And,
um,
and and so we need things like, you know, accounting systems that are, you know, audited and all those things to keep us out, you know, away from sin as much as possible. But it'll happen. It
it
always
happens.
has. It'll
It
Judas did
happens.
it. It'll continue to happen. And so we shouldn't be surprised when it happens. We just need the tools, right, to make it as rare as possible. And
Now, we talked about the chosen, and I've seen it now. And we're at the point where Judas is going to Caiaphas to do his deal with Caiaphas.
okay.
And the way Judas is portrayed is quite realistic.
Mm,
Like Jesus isn't doing what I thought he was going to do here. He's going to throw
mm,
this opportunity away to really reform and to throw out the Romans. And what is he doing? You know, he's throwing all these opportunities away. You know, and then of course the suggestion is there from other people. I'm interested to see how it all comes down, but he isn't portrayed as someone who just quote had it in for Jesus. He sort of
right.
backs into it, which I think is a lot more realistic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. The devil generally, or evil, whatever you want to say, temptation usually doesn't come at us straight on
no.
because it's just so obvious that we wouldn't do that. Like, you know, probably my temptation isn't going to be cocaine and hookers. I mean, it's just pretty far from my kind of
Yeah,
lifestyle. But what I am afraid of is just like going off my mission by 2 or 5 degrees. Like that's where you keep going a little bit off the mission and then you end up far away. And so
mm-hmm,
yeah, like you
mm-hmm.
said, he backs into it because a direct attack isn't usually going to work. And
No.
so it's interesting. You said like, what are the things we don't know? And that's always the thing I'm thinking about is like, where do I need to shore up? And mostly though, like what are my strengths? How do I play to my strengths? But then where are the areas that I'm weak and I need to make sure that I have people around me who are supporting me in those areas and kind of protecting the flank, so to speak. So
So, who is your ideal audience for this book? The clergy, the lay people, somewhere in between?
yeah, probably both. I mean, clergy are usually the main one who are, you know, running the show, and so they're usually the first ones to be interested in something like this. But then there's a lot of there's a lay people, you know, working in the church, whether it's the secretary, the accountant, the you know, or in a pastoral role where they're running small groups maybe or religious education or something. And then there's all the other kind of volunteers in a church who are trying to help in different ways. So I see there's a gap between people that are well formed in business and organizational health and those things, leadership skills, and then kind of the parish team and staff that often are, especially the pastor, who's usually well versed in the theology and biblical studies and all those things. And so the book helps to create a framework or language to span the gap between those two. And so all those people kind of in that circle between the parish leadership team, the pastoral council, finance council people, key volunteers, ministry leaders, right? There's this whole kind of group of people working in the parish that are often not on the same page. And the book is to give a framework so they can all be speaking the same language. And so really all those people could read the book and I think profit from it.
I just opened the book at random here, and here's the paragraph. They're talking about different qualities that we're looking for here. Um, Modeling Christ-like love. Ultimately, empathy in parish leadership is rooted in the example of Christ himself. Jesus consistently met people where they were. I really like that. Offering compassion, understanding, and invitation. He dined with sinners, touched the untouchable, and offered hope to the marginalized. By striving to model Christ's love in all their interactions, parish leaders can create a culture of empathy that permeates every aspect of parish life. Now, one thing that I thought that, and here we go back to the chosen thing, because I've just been so taken with this.
Yeah.
He did all of those things, but he
Mm-hmm.
put people in places where they could excel.
Yes.
He didn't keep people in places where they were going to be mediocre or fail. And you see, what I see in the church sometimes is what I call misplaced compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, we'll let Sally do this because she really wants to do that, and she's a terribly incompetent, you know. And
Right.
Jesus and Joseph would have never done that. Here,
Yeah.
let's put you over here, you
Yeah.
know, and he would have done it in a compassionate way, you
Right.
know. Yeah, it
Right.
wouldn't say, "Oh, you're too out, you don't fit the
Yeah.
profile,"
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
or that lovely thing that the business use. Oh, we don't think you're a good fit, you know.
Right.
How
Right.
many times have you heard that, you know?
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
But he took people where he found them, but he didn't put them in places where they fail for lack of ability. You
Uh-huh.
see, notice how he
Uh-huh.
didn't do that. And you look at how each of the disciples were sort of assuming their role with him and how that
Right.
worked.
Right.
Notice it was always usually Big James and Z that were the muscle. They were the ones that
Right.
were around him all the time. It was Matthew that was doing all the scribe work. He's one of the best educated ones there, you know.
Yeah.
And then Judas of all people was the more financially inclined guy, and so he was keeping the finances.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and of course Jesus tried his best with Peter, a mercurial leader, up down up down up down up down. I think he gave that. Peter gave Jesus so much heck. Just like, here
Oh
he
my
goes
gosh.
again.
He
What am I going to
did.
do with you? You know.
Totally. Yeah.
So, but but he did it in a way that was, you know, if you could get anywhere close to that, you see,
Yeah. Yeah.
and these men accepted it too. That they had a great reverence for him and who he was and his mission. And of course, they didn't really figure it out till the end. Even then, they didn't really figure it out.
Mhm.
But then he met people where they were, but he did not tolerate incompetence, and those are two separate things. And that's the point I want to make. And we see that a lot in Christian organizations where they'll tolerate incompetence because they think it's the compassionate thing to do, and it's not. It's
Right.
not.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's not good for the church. It's not good for the person in that role. It's not good for anybody. And so I used to think, because I'd heard this in different conferences, that, trust is built on vulnerability. I said, okay, there's a lot of truth to that. And then Oberg pointed out to me, competency is also important there. Like vulnerability by itself, if there's incompetence, just shows you more how incompetent you are. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you need to be open and vulnerable about talking about real issues and competent in what you're doing. And Jesus, yeah, really put people where their strengths were so they could play to their competencies, and they called them out when they weren't doing it well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
how do we not do that? I mean, every good shepherd is really trying to do that. And it's hard because you do have people who aren't there yet, wherever they're at in their spiritual. This is one of the hardest things, I think, is like understanding that there's like the way to be a good Christian. right? And
Ooh,
you
ooh.
show up and you tithe and you give here and you donate time and you do these things and like all the surface things. But then there's the internal spiritual journey that we're all
Hmm.
on to get closer and
Yes.
closer to God, right? And those two things are not, they should be kind of parallel, or like they should be working together, but they don't always work together or go on the same, they're not always connected, and they're often actually very disconnected because people kind of put on airs, or they're just doing what they think they should be doing versus doing the things to actually grow spiritually. And so my hope is with that part of like empathy is understanding both where they're at in their competencies and putting them where they're at they should be in the church structure, but also understanding their faith journey and meeting them where they're at there and helping them grow, because nobody's like supposed to be further along or further behind. It's just where you're at in your journey. And
So
and
they are.
that's just where you are. Yeah.
Well, there's that in word we have a lot in our church communities, that nice word. I want to be
Mm,
nice. I
mm.
get some interesting reactions when I say to people, Jesus was not a nice person.
Yeah,
And
they
they,
don't like it.
no, well,
They think
and
you're
I,
not being nice.
yeah, and I remind them, now let's clarify that. Now, Jesus
Yeah.
was compassionate. He was courageous. He was very loving with people. Nice, meaning go along to get along? Hell no. I mean, he
Yeah.
had some very hard things to say to people when they deserved it. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
you
Brood
just,
of vipers and
uh,
yeah, all those
yeah,
things. Yeah.
whitewashed tombs. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's one thing is uh, uh, twisted, craven theaters of desire. That's one that's in Chosen. Just like,
Right.
yeah,
Wow.
and
Okay.
and these
Yeah.
were these were, of course, the religious leaders who were used to
Right.
all sorts of deference. You're going to question me, you're going to
Yeah.
question me, and
Yeah.
you're some
Yeah.
country preacher from nowhere, and you're going to question me, you know.
Hmm.
Of
I
course,
use this a lot. I feel like it's part of my mission in the church is Matthew 10:36, which is I'm sending, sorry, 10:16. So I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves.
mm-hmm.
When I read that to pastors, boy, they cringe when I get to the snakes, and they love
Well,
it when I get to the doves. And I'm
well,
like,
and a lot of the more traditional translations say cunning as serpents,
yes,
innocent as doves. You
yes,
know, like,
yes,
don't be naive here. You
right,
know, recognize
right.
what's out there. And
Yep.
that you don't have to be one of them, but you have to be able to recognize it when you see it, and then confront it when you see it.
Yep. And part
And
of that
that's
is confronting incompetency, which maybe
mm-hmm.
feels like it's not nice, but it's, believe me, it's much worse to let it just go.
Oh,
And we've all seen that, right? Like you said, I remember one pastor was like he had a lady singing, this old lady singing, doing the cantoring at the church, and she was horrible and everybody knew it, but nobody would tell her to sit down and shut up. You know?
honey, it's time to sit down. It's time to
Yeah,
sit down.
like you've done your time. Maybe when you were younger, your voice is better. Like we just gotta face reality and, find your place in the church today, which is not from the podium,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, but you can imagine some of the reactions I get. Jesus was not a nice person, you
I
know,
bet.
and
They think these big eyes.
and then well, I sometimes I'll follow that up with, let's face it, you don't crucify Mister Rogers.
Mhm. So true. So true. This is, in sales, they teach you this, that one of the biggest indicators of a good salesperson is somebody who um, doesn't do it for their own ego. So they're able to separate their identity from the role, and they're able to keep their identity kind of safe in whatever that is. And for us, that's like, I'm a child of God. And so if I sell a lot or little, like I can stay more emotionally balanced, and I'm more indifferent to it, right? It also helps to have a full pipeline and a good running business instead of just,
That helps.
that helps a lot too. But the but for a pastor, it's so important, or anybody in the church, to be able to say, like, again, it's not about me, and to have this like holy indifference,
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, it's not about me. It's about the mission. It's about the church. It's about helping other people. And so if this person is incompetent, it doesn't matter if it hurts my feelings or it hurts their feelings. I need to do what's right,
No,
not what feels good.
it's
Like,
damaging the church. It's damaging the mission.
yeah,
If Because Jesus calls us to be our very best.
yep,
He doesn't want the leftovers, the has been, like, oh, I'll do everything, whatever's left, I'll give it to Jesus. He want
yeah.
well, even our Jewish friends, they wanted the spotless lambs, the number one. You know,
Right,
we
right.
don't take the one that's lame or anything. Oh no, no, we
Yeah,
want
yeah.
the absolute best you can come up with. So anyway, Christian, we could talk forever, and we'll probably do this again. But where can people buy the book? Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. You can also go to just managementasmissionbook.com and order it there. Both are great. Love to get reviews when people want to give us feedback. And the first one, there's probably not too many in print left, but are the is kind of the beta version. We're reformatting it with we'll do an audio version soon. And so
So
yeah,
which one do I have? The original?
you have the original. You have the
Okay.
original, and
And
we've
I'm a little annoyed. You know why?
why is that?
You did not inscribe it, son.
I didn't sign it. Ah, I got to get you a new one. Well, I'm gonna come there to Idaho personally one of these days and sign
Well,
it
you
for you.
do. Be my guest here, would you please? And um, by the way, next, I guess it's Thursday, we start another training cohort with how to in our fundraising philanthropy. And one is they approached us is a parish with a grammar school,
Oh, oh, interesting.
and they're looking to train how to do their fundraising more professionally, more relationally,
Yeah,
uh, in the grammar school. And of course, they do what most grammar schools do, events and this and that and the other, parent fatigue,
sure.
the whole thing. And someone mentioned us, and the guy was like, "Oh yeah, I want to do this." And so he was a parish. Well, I don't know what his term, but he's the top lay leader in this of this school.
Okay, okay,
and
okay.
um and it's a diocesan school, but apparently they can do their own thing in terms
Sure.
of fundraising and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, this is just a grammar school, and they want to learn how they can be more effective.
That's
So
great.
yeah, I'm
Man,
looking.
we need that. There's
Mm-hmm,
a lot of space for growth.
mm-hmm.
So I'm glad for
All right.
them.
So we'll be in touch. I
All right.
Yeah, I like this. And so, well, everyone, I've been talking to Kristian Jaloway this afternoon. I've been having a delightful conversation, and I want to thank Kristian for taking his time to do this. And I'm sure you'll want to get to know him and his partner, John Oberg, Oberg, and their book, Management as Mission, which he says is available on Amazon Prime, Amazon, and then also managementasmission.com.
Yes. Yep.
All
You'll
right.
find it there as well.
Okay.
So
And
very
I've
good.
just I've been I'm going to continue to delve into this, and I'll probably give you a couple of calls. But so thank you, Kristian, for doing this very much.
Larry, thank you.
Well, and it's been my pleasure. So until I see you again, thank you.